Eddie Fatu was the kind of wrestler who didn't need a long entrance, a catchy slogan, or a 20-minute promo to make you feel something. All he had to do was step through the curtain, stare through people, and move like a 350-pound man had absolutely no business moving. In an era full of loud characters, Eddie Fatu created fear with silence. And when he was reintroduced to the world in 2006 as Umaga, they didn't present him as a wrestler on the roster. They presented him like a problem that had escaped containment, an unstoppable force that made even main event stars look small, weak, and helpless. But Umaga's story is not just monster booking and highlight reels. It's one of the most complicated careers wrestling ever had in the modern era, because Eddie Fatu's life had two truths running side by side. Truth number one, he was genuinely talented, surprisingly athletic for his size, and capable of great big man performances when paired with the right opponents. Truth number two, behind the character was a man dealing with the harsh reality of wrestling's lifestyle, injuries, pressure, and personal struggles that followed him long after the crowd stopped chanting. This is the full story of Umaga. From his beginnings in the legendary Anoa'i family to his first run as Jamal in 3-Minute Warning to his shocking reinvention as Umaga, the wars with John Cena, the Intercontinental Championship run, the WrestleMania Battle of the Billionaire Spotlight, the late career comeback, his sudden exit from the company, and the tragedy that ended his life far too young. Edward Smith Fatu was born on March 28th, 1973 in American Samoa, part of the famous Anoa'i wrestling family, one of the most influential families the industry has ever seen. In wrestling, family ties can open doors, but they don't keep you there. Eddie still had to become someone worth watching, and from early on, he had the two things you can't teach: presence and intensity. He didn't look like he was playing a character. He looked like he was being himself turned up to terrifying. He trained under Afa Anoa'i, one of the legendary Wild Samoans, and that training mattered because it gave Eddie a foundation rooted in old school toughness. The Anoa'i style has always been about believable physicality. You're not supposed to look like you're performing. You're supposed to look like you're fighting. Eddie Fatu carried that DNA into everything he did. Even later, when Vince McMahon gave him the Umaga presentation, tribal paint, savage mannerisms, the Samoan spike, his physicality didn't feel fake. It felt like a big man who could genuinely hurt you if the script stopped. Eddie debuted in professional wrestling in the mid-1990s, grinding through the system, building experience, learning how to work as a big man, and developing the most important skill any giant can have: how to make opponents look like they survived you. Eddie Fatu's first major run came in 2002, but not as Umaga. He arrived as Jamal, one half of 3-Minute Warning alongside his cousin Matt Anoa'i, known as Rosie. The team was introduced on Raw as enforcers for then Raw General Manager Eric Bischoff, and the gimmick was simple: when Bischoff had a problem, he unleashed them. They were the muscle, the warning label, the guys who didn't negotiate. 3-Minute Warning worked because they felt like the kind of tag team that didn't care about applause. They cared about damage. Jamal was the more menacing presence, bigger, wilder, and quicker than people expected. And even though this run didn't turn Eddie into a single star yet, it showed Vince McMahon something crucial. He could be a featured act on a major show, and he could hold his own in high-profile segments. But the early 2000s, the wrestling lifestyle was intense, and Eddie's first run didn't last forever. After 3-Minute Warning ended, his path became less stable, and for a while, it seemed like he might become one of those talented names that fans remember as what could have been. The difference is, Eddie Fatu didn't vanish. He rebuilt. When Vince McMahon wants to establish a monster, they feed him legends, and Umaga's early run included major moments that signaled his place on the card. He got into wars with respected veterans and was positioned as a main event level problem even before he ever held a major singles title. That's the genius of Umaga's booking. Vince made him feel like a final boss before they ever gave him a belt. The crowd didn't have to be told he was dangerous, they watched it. And then came the matchup that cemented Umaga's peak aura, because they paired him with the face of the company. If you want the defining Umaga rivalry, it's John Cena. By late 2006 into early 2007, Umaga was on a collision course with the WWE champion, and the reason it worked is simple. Cena was the superhero babyface, and Umaga was the monster who didn't care about superhero speeches. He didn't respect Cena, he didn't fear him, he didn't play along, he just kept coming. Their most famous match happened at the Royal Rumble in January 2007, a last man standing match for the WWE Championship. This match is often remembered as one of Umaga's best performances in the company because it played into his strengths perfectly. It wasn't about chain wrestling, it was about impact, chaos, endurance, and the feeling that Cena was running out of ideas. Cena had to throw everything at Umaga just to keep him down, and Umaga sold that idea brilliantly, that you could hurt him, but you couldn't tame him. That's what a great monster match does. It makes the hero look brave, and it makes the monster look like something beyond normal rules. Umaga didn't win that night, but he didn't need to. He left with something arguably more valuable: credibility. Fans could look at him and believe, yeah, that guy could be champion. And the company clearly believed it too, because Umaga's next major spotlight wasn't just a title match, it was WrestleMania level mainstream attention. In 2007, Umaga became Vince McMahon's chosen representative for the Battle of the Billionaires storyline, Vince McMahon versus Donald Trump, with wrestlers fighting in their place. Trump's representative was Bobby Lashley. Vince's representative was Umaga. That WrestleMania 23 match was not designed to be a technical masterpiece. It was designed to be a spectacle with a massive celebrity hook, and Umaga's job was to be the villain's weapon, McMahon's monster, standing between Lashley and victory. Umaga played the role perfectly. He looked like the obstacle, the guy Lashley had to survive. And even though Umaga lost at WrestleMania, he didn't come out looking weak. He came out looking like a threat that required a powerhouse like Lashley to overcome. And right after WrestleMania, Umaga's career hit another major milestone, one that added legitimacy to his run beyond monster booking. In early 2007, Umaga captured the Intercontinental Championship, beating Jeff Hardy to win the title. This mattered because the Intercontinental Championship has historically been considered as the workhorse title, the belt most associated with weekly performances, rivalries, and consistent TV presence. And in this period, Umaga delivered some of the most memorable matches of his run. Jeff Hardy was the perfect opponent for him because Hardy could bump like he'd been hit by a truck, and Umaga's offense looked brutal enough to justify those reactions. Their rivalry was a classic, the fearless daredevil trying to survive the monster. Umaga's Intercontinental title run included one of the most famous shocking moments in Raw history. In April 2007, they introduced a new character, Santino Marella, as a supposed fan pulled from the crowd who, helped by outside interference, ended up defeating Umaga for the Intercontinental Championship in his debut. The reason this moment is remembered is because Umaga was booked as nearly unstoppable, so the idea that a brand new guy could beat him felt insane. It made Santino instantly famous, and it showed just how protected Umaga had been, because it required a very specific setup to take the title from him. But Umaga didn't stay down. He regained the Intercontinental Championship later in 2007, re-establishing himself as a dominant presence. And then the title shifted again. Jeff Hardy eventually won the championship back in 2007, continuing the back and forth history between them. This stretch, Umaga as Intercontinental Champion, mixing brutality with surprisingly crisp big man movement, is where many fans argue he was at his best. Not necessarily because he was the best wrestler, but because the division and the opponents allowed him to be the best version of himself. A lot of big men have size. Very few big men have conviction. Umaga wrestled like he believed he was dangerous. Every headbutt, every slam, every corner charge, every wild strike. It wasn't pretty, but it felt real. And then there was the Samoan spike, his most infamous weapon. It was a simple move, but they framed it like a finishing strike that could end you instantly. The key was presentation. Umaga would load it up, stalk his opponent, and strike with the kind of sudden aggression that made crowds gasp. It looked like something you couldn't train to defend against. It looked like panic. That's what Umaga was, panic in wrestler form. The moment he started moving forward, the match became a survival story. In 2008, Umaga was drafted to SmackDown. It was a fresh chapter, new opponents, new energy, and potentially a new main event path. But then reality hit. Injuries. Umaga suffered a significant knee injury in 2008, and it stalled his momentum. Big men can't afford knee issues the way smaller wrestlers sometimes can, because their entire movement depends on joints doing impossible work. When Umaga returned in early 2009, Vince McMahon tried to rebuild him again. New focus, new matches, and the same core presentation. He was the monster, and for a moment, it felt like it could work all over again. In 2009, one of Umaga's last major feuds was with CM Punk. The story revolved around Punk's Money in the Bank briefcase, and Umaga repeatedly interrupting Punk's attempts to cash in. It was a smart use of Umaga, not just random destruction, but targeted chaos that affected a major storyline. They fought in a high-profile match at Judgment Day 2009, and later faced off again at Extreme Rules 2009 in a Samoan strap match, Umaga's last WWE match. And then, suddenly Umaga's run ended. In June 2009, the company released him. Reports later indicated it was connected to a wellness policy violation and issues around rehabilitation requirements, but regardless of the behind-the-scenes specifics, the outcome was painfully clear. Vince had lost one of his most unique monsters. Umaga was only in his mid-30s. He should have had years left, but life had different plans. On December 4th, 2009, Eddie Fatu passed away at just 36 years old in Houston, Texas. His death shocked the wrestling world because Umaga still felt like a modern wrestler. He didn't feel like someone from the old days. He felt current, like someone who could have returned, reinvented again, and had another run. Reports and medical findings later indicated his death involved a heart attack and acute toxicity from multiple substances alongside underlying health issues. The important part to say, without sensationalizing it, is that this was a tragedy shaped by the realities that have taken too many wrestlers. Physical damage, pressure, and personal battles that don't end when the cameras stop. And that's the part fans struggle with. Umaga wasn't just a character. Eddie Fatu was a person, a father, a family man, a wrestler carrying the weight of an industry that often asks for everything and gives back pain in return. Umaga's legacy is bigger than his title history. Yes, he was a dominant Intercontinental Champion. Yes, he headlined major pay-per-views. Yes, he had a defining classic monster match with John Cena. Yes, he was trusted with WrestleMania-level mainstream spotlight. But his legacy is also in the way people remember him, as one of wrestling's last truly convincing, unstoppable monsters who could still move, still perform, and still make the audience feel fear. And his influence is literal too. The Samoan spike didn't vanish with him. Later generations paid tribute, most notably within his own family.
Solo's doing the spike in WWE.
But nah, kudos to him, kudos to Hunter too for allowing that. And I remember that too a few years ago. He did that on the day that my dad passed away, and it was on a Monday Night Raw to Matt Riddle. And when he did it, it sparked, a lot of love that my dad had. Not only that, just in our family, and it felt right. And I think Hunter, he's seen something in that, and they are where they are now.
With wrestlers continuing the move as a nod to Umaga's memory, the most painful part is imagining what could have been, because Eddie Fatu didn't feel finished. He felt like someone who could have evolved, softened the character, changed the presentation, maybe even become a different kind of veteran presence. Instead, his story became a reminder of wrestling's harshest truth. Sometimes the most intense performers are fighting battles you can't see. Umaga was never supposed to be loved the way some stars are loved. He was built to be feared, built to be booed, built to be the monster the hero barely survives. But years later, fans don't just remember the fear, they remember the talent, the intensity, the aura, the way he made every match feel like a real fight, the way he could step into a ring and instantly raise the stakes. So here's the question. When you think of Umaga, what defines him most? The unstoppable 2006 to 2007 monster who ran through Raw, the John Cena war that proved he belonged at the top, the Intercontinental Championship era where he felt like a complete act, or the tragedy, how quickly everything ended before he could truly write his final chapter? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you want more full story wrestling documentaries like this, Rise, Fall, Truth, and Legacy, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.